This episode of Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast is brought to you by MG Schlachter, a built environment and architectural consulting firm with an in-house production team. Delivering support services in the retail, hospitality, and residential sectors for leading brands worldwide, MG Schlachter is reinventing, something near and dear to my heart, of course, architectural support services. So look, let's say you're a worldwide fashion retailer and your new business plan calls for opening 450 new stores around the world this year. Or say you're an architecture firm and in order to grow, you need to staff up quickly to produce detailed drawing packages for your new winning project. Or dig this. Let's say you're a national hospitality brand who's putting together a new line of boutique hotels and you've got to produce a massive amount of graphics, such as custom artwork, posters, or slide decks, both in digital and print. MG Schlachter serves architecture and interior design firms, retailers, construction companies, graphic designers, and brand managers. And with the way they're reinventing architectural support services, they offer production and strategic consulting. Their in-house production team understands the importance of accuracy and precision and can demonstrate the utmost care throughout the drawing and delivery process. And on the consulting side, their team consists of architects and international design consultants with many years of experience in design and construction. Suffice it to say that whatever built environment or architectural project you're working on, MG Schlachter can step in and help accelerate your growth. So, if you're looking for a built environment and architectural services firm with an in-house production team to help you reinvent your next project, check out MG Schlachter. Find them on the web at mgschlachter.com. That's mgschlachter.com, mgschlachter.com. Hey revolutionaries, have you been watching the price of Bitcoin lately? Yeah, I know, it's been jumping up. I'm looking at it right now. It's $11,662 US dollars per Bitcoin. And I know you guys are watching it because you are a savvy crew out there that are interested in these types of things. And you know, it's more on my mind lately because of this week's episode where I'm talking to Ari Lewis and we're talking about how he created a cryptocurrency hedge fund and how he got into cryptocurrency, when he was like 14 or 15 years old. Pretty amazing, and how he turned, $18K into $1.4 million and really got himself into the space. And talking this week about his innovation consulting that he does now and his new venture fund that he's putting together for blockchain-based companies. So super excited to bring you this week's episode. But before we get there, I just want to remind you that Podcast Movement, the national, international big podcasting conference is coming up in Orlando, Florida, August 13th to the 16th. And my client AudioMute is coming to the show for the first time and working on a project to bring him down to the conference and figure out some promotions for the booth and introduce him to some of the podcasting folks I know. And one of the ideas being kicked around for the show is to have some product demo samples produced with show art, album cover art of individual podcasters' show, so they can display demo samples in their booth and show this off to basically the podcasting universe. But in order to do this, I need samples of people's shows out there who would be interested in having their art produced on a panel. So if you're listening and have your own podcast, or you know someone else that does who might be interested, you can send me an email at jimjim@jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com and put in the subject line Podcast Movement 2019 sound panel opportunity, something like that. That's all I'm going to say right now. I'm working internally. I've got a few shows already identified, but I thought, hey, why not provide this opportunity for everybody who's listening out there? Really appreciate everybody who's listening and who's given reviews and, posted things on social media about the show. Really appreciate it. And, but act quickly. And also, if you're going to Podcast Movement, that would also be great because then you could maybe take the panel home with you. So, again, no promises, but act quickly if you're interested. And hopefully we can work something out. All right, well, let's work it out right now with Ari Lewis and see what he's been up to in the crypto and blockchain scene these days.
Welcome to Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, Here's your host, Jim.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim, and welcome to episode 54 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Ari Lewis, and we're talking innovation consulting and blockchain today. So Ari, welcome to the revolution.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Hey, well, thanks for coming over and bearing the heat today here in Cleveland as we're sitting here in Cleveland Heights. Before we dig into these things, I wanted to tell you how you came up on my radar screen. And because a couple years ago, when I was first looking into blockchain and cryptocurrency and all those kinds of things, I saw this local article about, I think it was you and a partner of yours, about how you started with $18,000 and turned it somehow into 1.4 million, sort of in this early mania, or recent mania, I guess, of cryptocurrency and blockchain. So it kind of came up on my radar, and I'm thinking, I didn't realize there were people locally that were into some of these technologies like I was kind of getting into. So it was like, that's interesting. There's some cool things going on here. So can you just maybe refresh my memory of what was going on back then? Like, where were you back then? And what did that spawn for you? Because I know you've got these other businesses going on, which we'll talk about in a second, but what was going on back then?
Yeah, so great question, Jim, and I'm glad that people recognized us from that article. In 2011, when I was a junior in high school, I got into Bitcoin. And
okay, wait a second, right there. 2011, you're a junior in high school.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. This is exactly what I wanted to know. Okay, because 2011 is early. Like, how on earth did you discover Bitcoin in 2011?
Yeah, so
what were you doing? This is curious. This is the curiosity that I have.
Yeah, no, totally get it. It's a completely fair question. I was luckily in touch with someone that I knew in the financial services field who started getting into cryptocurrency, and he introduced me to Bitcoin. I started researching it and learning more about it, and I actually ended up building an esports application for betting with Bitcoin with my partner who you're referring to, Sagar Rambia.
Okay.
We ended up, investing a bit more heavily in Bitcoin and then in Ethereum and a few ICOs and did really well in terms of our multiples and how we did. So, after that, in 2017, when I was graduating college, I went to Case Western. Mm-hmm. I started a hedge fund with him called Grasshopper Capital, which is, the culmination of that story.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, this is kind of what I wanted to explore. First of all, it's amazing that somehow you get turned on in 2011, which, Bitcoin was just sort of, I think the white paper came out maybe in 2008, end of 2008, somewhere around in there. And maybe it started in 2009. It's kind of my recollection of the timeline. So it's just a couple years into it. That's pretty early to figure it out and to be open-minded enough to say, let me explore this, especially when you're talking about financial-oriented things. So I'm not sure what you're thinking or how savvy you are at this point when you're just in high school. Did you have was your family into finance at all, or were they educated people, or why were you open to this?
Yeah, it was just luck. I come from a middle class family. My father sold pots and pans for a living. He was in the kitchen supply industry, and my mom was a housewife.
Okay.
So he didn't really have a financial services background.
Right.
I just was really interested in one of the things that really drew me to cryptocurrency was the concept of savings within remittance. So if you think about the remittance industry, right, stuff like Swift, Western Union, when we make ACH transfers, it should be really quick to transfer money, especially, if you think about immigrants and people of lesser means, they're getting taken advantage of by large financial services institutions every day in terms of the transaction fees and the slowness of which these transactions are occurring.
Right.
So I thought Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was a novel approach to how to solve these problems, and I really think it's still a huge opportunity to disrupt the remittance industry across the globe and really be impactful in the financial services world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think day by day we're at least I am. I think everybody else is starting to get up to speed with seeing that vision and understanding the implications and the possibilities. But it's pretty fascinating to kind of figure that out as, like you said, junior in high school. So you kind of get into this scene. you do well. I think the timing just happened to work out for you too, because it was sort of this starting to scale up and get more, I guess, known in general parlance of society, of life, I guess, in a way. So when you go to school, did that inform your decision of what to study in school? Did you study finance in school?
So I was a business management major with a focus on entrepreneurship. So
okay.
my big passions growing up were, starting businesses. When I was like 12, I was taking supplies from my father's business and selling them, on the streets of New York City, forks and knives and glass plates.
Okay.
and trying to sell them to people in Chinatown as they walked, down the streets. So that was really my first business, was selling glassware and pots and pans in Chinatown, New York City.
Wow. All right. So you lived in New York when you were in high school?
So I lived in Long Island, which is a suburb of New York City, or Manhattan rather.
Okay. And so you decided to come to Case for school. Did you have an Ohio connection? And is that why you discovered Case Western, which is located in Cleveland?
Yeah, there was no Ohio connection. I actually played soccer at Case Western.
Oh, you did? Sweet. I played soccer. I played soccer in high school. So very good. And I could have probably played in college, but I just never... It wasn't on my radar screen back then for some reason. But once I got to school, I ended up going to Xavier, just a little aside here. And, they had a soccer team, and I thought, like, my God, I could play on this team. No problem. I should have probably tried out. But anyways, that's cool that you got to play soccer. Would you get a scholarship? Do they give scholarships for soccer at Case or no?
No, it's a Division III school, so D3.
Okay.
No scholarships there.
Okay. Oh, bummer. All right. Anyways, all right. So you go to Case. You found Case. Case is great school. Very, hard to get into. Super intellectual over there. And so you decided to study business. So you got this entrepreneur mindset. So that's interesting. I was thinking, with all the knowledge that you have now, maybe you were really a finance guy or kind of got into that. So you're there, and what are you thinking when you decide, hey, let's open a fund or whatever? How did you know how to do that?
So we were really lucky in the sense that, we had great mentors around us, and Google is actually a fantastic resource.
Absolutely.
I didn't know anyone who had started a fund before. I had, through a bit of fortuitousness of, good Googling, looked up hedge fund lawyer.
Okay.
And I actually ended up connecting with the hedge fund lawyer who established most of the early cryptocurrency funds.
Oh, really? Okay.
And because of that, we were connected with great service providers, both on the fund administration level and on the audit side.
I see.
And, once we got the fund up and running, we were just, we really grinded. Mm-hmm. We spoke to 400 plus investors, and we were really lucky to get, 20, 25 really good investors that trusted us with their money, and we'll be forever grateful for that.
Yeah, it was kind of the one of the questions at the top of my mind there. So you're 20-ish something at this point, right? And you're investigating this stuff. What are the lawyers thinking of you when you reach out to them? Do they understand that hey, this is the technology of your era and take you very seriously? Or what are they thinking, like, you're 20 years old, dude, like, come on, you're not going to start a fund, are you?
I think
what was the experience?
Yeah, I think money is something that has its own language. So as long as you have the capital to pay them, they don't care if you're a 12-year-old or an 80-year-old. They're happy to set it up and help you.
Right. Well, you know what? I love that, and there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said there. So that's, I think, part of the message that people need to hear, that in terms of the way, the reinvention revolution, the way I think of it, and is that there's so much opportunity and so much innovation happening currently, that if you just sort of embrace it and figure it out, there's so much, opportunity to, it's monetarily to kind of, have assets and do well for yourself, but also to, work on your community, bring people together, et cetera. That's really beyond just the money part, in my mind, the fascinating thing about how we're getting connected here. Okay, so you start this fund. How did you market it, and how did you find the investors? Were you just concentrating regionally here in Northeast Ohio? Were you looking across the country, or what were your thoughts at that point?
Yeah, so I think for many, you're 23, you're out of college, most people are just happy to get a job.
Right.
While, we were trying to raise, tens of millions of dollars, so definitely a different mindset.
Right.
For us, we spoke to, people we had cultivated with relationships over the years, people that, had helped mentor us and have been friends to us, and started with that group. As that group winded down and their introductions, started to also cool down, we focused on alumni of Case Western, obviously, which you mentioned earlier, where I went to college,
right,
and other, potential connections that we could have. So my partner is actually a medical school student at Case. He's a fourth year. And we were reaching out to doctors at Cleveland Clinic or University Hospital because Sagar had a really unique story to tell. And then just continue to exhaust those channels, and it ended up where we got to the point that we had a good amount of capital to prove out our thesis.
Right.
And that's really how we ended up raising a few $1 million. I think at our peak we had about 15 million in AUM, and grew the business and grew the capital.
I see. So the I was looking on your website. So it sounded like do you have two funds? You had one fund that you had invested in is now shut down, and you started a new fund, or how? Tell me about and we should mention the name of this business. This is the Grasshopper Capital fund that's concentrated on blockchain companies, right? Was the money just solely to be invested in blockchain technologies?
Yeah, so our first fund was a hedge fund, and hedge funds, for those of you that don't know, typically invest in liquid investments. And what I mean by liquid investment is, if you think about equity, you think about commodities, you think about futures, options, whatnot. Those are liquid markets because you can buy and sell them regularly. But if you think about venture investing, you think about I invested in Uber, right? I invested in Facebook when it was right. That could take 5-10 years before you can either
before there's a liquidation event, as they call it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our fund's mandate was to invest in liquid.
I see. Okay.
Digital currencies, and as such, those are things like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, and other tokens. As we grew, we ended up outperforming Bitcoin by 10% on a net basis through inception, and then decided to wind down the fund because we didn't feel like we could earn alpha for our investors and didn't want to, be taking a fee from them and not feel like we can execute on it. So we sold them
And why did you have that feeling? Was this kind of during the time where everything was starting to crash, like in 2018?
Yeah, so that's a really great question.
Is that why, or is it just like maybe you got lucky to start, or where you didn't feel like you had the expertise to kind of move through that valley?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of many things. Timing of the markets. Where the LP fundraising processes were in terms of new LPs. But also, the markets were changing. We have a real belief now, or at least me personally, that, Bitcoin is going to make up the majority of gains in the token industry in the next, few years. And as such, I didn't feel like it would be fair to just be investing in Bitcoin when, many investors can do that on their own for much lesser fees.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's reasonable, I think. And so in this, I was thinking about the culling process. I guess when you go into this low and the market kind of drops down, I guess it makes sense that a lot of these ICOs are out there. Everybody, I think, by now realizes there was a real mania going on with the ICOs and the altcoins, et cetera. So a lot of those have kind of fallen probably by the wayside just naturally. But is that what you mean? Why you think most of the gains kind of coming up that you see going forward will be in Bitcoin and not all these alts, even though there's a handful of them that are pretty compelling in terms of their capabilities?
Yeah, so I think most of the tokens out there are selling based on potential rather than on current usages and use cases. And when we talk about, tokens and what's out there and what value is currently being delivered, I really only see value in 3, maybe 4 tokens. Bitcoin, obviously, because it was a first mover, it's emerging potentially as an alternative to gold. 2, it's disruptive of remittance, and it's just something that can definitely become a potential store of value down the line. 2, Ethereum. Ethereum's more speculative in nature, but there's definitely an opportunity if smart contracts scale and become mainstream for it to really be the gas of the internet, right? So if you think about, oil and you put it in cars, well, imagine, ether is fueling the next internet. Monero has an interesting use case because it's a privacy token, right? We could debate the legalities or illegalities of what it's being used for, but there's a definite need, for private blockchains, not private meaning, public versus private, but private in the sense of a blockchain's, transactions being impossible to pin down specific public keys and where and when they're going to them. So Monero, I think, is definitely an interesting use case and potentially a strong use case. And then lastly, Zcash, which is also a privacy token. I think they're, it's more of a maybe, and they're doing some interesting things around the technology that they're developing. I don't know how strong that will be or what will come of it, but those are really the only four I see at the moment that actually, are delivering value or potentially could deliver value in the future.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, it changes day by day. It's very interesting to kind of figure this out. I mean, it's very intriguing for me since, kind of looking how it's impacting other technologies where I've been in the, world of advanced technology development, physical hardware engineering kind of things. And it's really spawning a lot of creativity in terms of new platforms they're created, different applications of platforms that are integrating software and hardware. Because, it seems like software and technology is just, coming to eat the world or eat us all these days. Interesting. So, all right, so what's going on with Grasshopper Capital now? Are you thinking about putting a new fund together, kind of just taking a pause here, or what's happening with it now?
Yeah, so we're raising a second fund that's a venture fund that's going to be, focusing on blockchain equity and not focusing on token investing.
Oh, okay, cool. So is that open for investing now? Are you raising money now for that fund? Like if people are out there listening that are interested in perhaps of, exploring this kind of space for themselves?
Yeah, so it's illegal to publicly fundraise, so I can't comment actually on.
Well, we're not commenting. I just asked the question
on a fundraise and promote a fundraise.
I see. Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know that that's illegal then. All right. Well, people can find you out there if they're interested in that kind of stuff. I just I didn't know better not to ask these questions. So, but that's why I'm here to figure this stuff out, for myself and hopefully for everybody's listening out there. But okay, cool. Well, but the other thing that came out of your recent experience with getting into this space and having this early experience is your other company that is it co-founded or founded called Innovation Consulting? So, I'm sorry, it's called Green Block Group, which does innovation consulting. So tell me about how that got started and why you decided to move into that space.
Sure. So when I was winding down Fund 1 and we were selling it, I was consulting for the state of Ohio Treasurer's Office.
Okay.
And in the state of Ohio, can now you pay your taxes in cryptocurrency?
Your business taxes, correct?
Yes, correct. Your business taxes.
Okay.
So I
believe, sorry to jump in here, but I believe it was the first state in the country to approve this. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So they hired me to help.
State of Ohio people.
so they hired me to help set that up for them. When we launched that, I became friendly with the chief of staff at the Treasurer's Office, who I worked closely with. Mm-hmm. And we saw a real need for, people who run products to need help around marketing, PR, really explaining what they do. Because, there's a lot of great developers and engineers out there who can build products.
Right.
But they need help, explaining why is this product necessary and who to sell this to.
Right.
So we decided to start Green Block Group, which is a strategic communication and innovations firm. And we like to describe ourselves as helping, create and distribute and launch content for whether it's a product, a brand, or a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. So, if you think about a startup that's, raised some money and they're about to launch their product, they'd come in and hire us and really help create buzz around it and help create content so that, customers, investors, other stakeholders know what's going on and why they should be listened to and why they're important in the space.
Right. And it sounds like you're more focused on the sort of the technical niche, right, of new technology, whether they're products or services, of those folks, or would you take on any kind of company that's, hey, I'm starting a new candy brand or something like that?
So we're open to working with lots of, variety of companies, whether it's a small company, a large company, or a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. The most important thing for the what we're looking for out of a client is one that knows, either A, they need work in terms of, blocking and tackling, in the sense of, we need content written, can you help us write that?
Sure.
Or two, maybe it's more strategic advisory work, and it's like, we get this, we have a problem, but we don't understand, what does the future look like for us? Mm-hmm. And how can we help them, become experts in that future, and what does that look like for their company? So they're sort of like the two things that, we try to help with in terms of, advising companies.
I gotcha. So it's kind of a niche agnostic, I would say, but, you're open to whatever. If it's a good fit, obviously, it's got to be a good fit for both folks.
Yeah, right? I would say, where it's not our focus, we're not the digital guys, right? We're not the people who are making websites or doing graphic design,
right?
Running digital campaigns.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, that sounds interesting too, and it sort of leads into a topic I want to discuss a little bit, and that's more regional stuff that's going on with technology, blockchain, here in the Cleveland area, because I think you've been a good voice in terms of getting people interested and raising the issue of, hey, is there really a lot of technology things going on in Cleveland? Is there reasons to move to Cleveland for technology? What's going on with blockchain in the region? So I can tell that your communication skills are working there, because that's one of the reasons why I noticed you. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your thoughts on, trying to develop technologies or blockchain solutions, or even being into crypto and being in Cleveland or being in the Northeast Ohio region. How do you think about it?
So I guess, can you clarify the question a bit in terms of, are you asking about, how does being in Northeast Ohio help you in terms of when you're building emerging technologies?
Well, that's one aspect. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to kind of get your feelings. So you grew up in New York, you spent time in New York, you came here for school. It sounds like you really, dig being here. You've had some great success in terms of some of the connections you probably made with the Cleveland Clinic and certain things that are going on in town. And it sounds like from your voice, you're like, hey man, like I think I just noticed an article you, I believe, released on Facebook today about why Cleveland, why now, why it's a great place for developing technology. So how did you get to that point in your mind versus, why aren't you in San Francisco right now?
Sure. So when you think about startups and building them, both from an investment standpoint and building standpoint, someone would talk about 20 years ago building a startup in San Francisco out of their garage, right? But if you go to New York, you go to San Fran, and you're building a company, that garage now costs $1 million.
Absolutely.
Plus, you still have to hire the team, right, market, do the whole 9 yards.
Right.
So, why not come to a place like Cleveland? It's a great quality of life. It's great in terms of the culture. There's so many things to do. I think, you have great sports teams, and just the costs are a fraction of what they are on the coast. So I think, more people in terms of, when you're thinking about what you want to do next, should come to and look at Cleveland, should come and look at, Ohio and the Midwest, because I think there's really a change developing here, and there's an optimism in the air, mm-hmm. and they're realizing, the values that Ohio in the Midwest were built on aren't just good for building companies here, but hiring talent. Because, this is really the heartland of America, and this is the heartland of, in terms of, we have great workers and great talent here, and I think people are beginning to recognize that and realize that.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely have that feeling, that optimistic sort of wave that's kind of floating around the city these days. And I'm I was born in Cleveland, but I'm not really a homer in that sense. I love Cleveland. I love the people here. But, I traveled around. As soon as I started into the working world, I traveled out to Silicon Valley many times, my first job when I was working for General Motors. And, because I knew that's where the technologies were being developed. So that was part of my career. I had to be, stay up to speed and all that stuff. Ended up moving to New England and got into the high-tech scene out there with fiber optics and such. But lately I'm thinking like, gosh, if I was coming out of school today, I don't know if I'd be so readily to think like I need to go to those locations. You know, we're so much more connected. There's so much more visibility of what's really happening, and the quality of life has really changed. I think that's a key out there where it's like, you know, I've been in California and people will be like, oh, you should go to, you know, this beach or this and that. And it's like, you know, if you're not planning your whole day around it and getting up at 7 to drive there when there's no traffic, I mean, you're not getting to the beach, you know, because you're going to be sitting in hours of traffic. You know, those things you find out only when you show up there. You know, otherwise you're just thinking this imaginary idea in your head of what it would be like to live out there. But anyways, you know what? Before I forget about this, I wanted to show you this thing about. You reminded me of living out in New England when I worked for Corning. I think I showed you this chart because talking about this crazy mania of, you know, Bitcoin going up and down, all this kind of stuff. So I was working for Corning in the heart of the telecom industry, developing the physical layer. This was 1998, I think I jumped in when I moved to Connecticut, and then this is around 99, 2000. And this is, so I'm going to show Ari the chart of Corning Incorporated, and you can see the years here. It shows this massive peak right around 1999, 2000, 2001, right before the big tech bubble burst. That's what they talk about. So I don't know if you've ever seen a chart like this. And knowing that you're into Bitcoin and you're probably looking at charts like this every day, this was the real deal. Okay, this was real public corporations, real money moving around, like real this was like in the heart of real society. Like Bitcoin is kind of like off in this la la land of its own, where the big corporations haven't been so involved in it. But at this time, it was crazy to me. Like I didn't realize how kind of historic it was when I was living through it. Anyways. He's smiling, looking at the chart. Maybe I'll post this on the Facebook page for everybody to see. But I just thought, you know, he's only 24. He needs to, you know, learn some of this history here. So, anyways, what did you think of that? Pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, I think that it's you know, crazy sort of. You know, I think about 99 and 2000, the wave of mania around stock prices, and you know, we definitely saw that in the cryptocurrency industry. But what I will challenge you on is, you know, sure, well, big corporations are beginning to get involved, you know, in cryptocurrency, and sure, not specifically in Bitcoin necessarily, but like Facebook just released Libra.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And, you know, there are still large companies, you know, supporting Bitcoin, and institutions, you know, MIT, I think a couple of years ago, you know, gave out a Bitcoin to every student that graduated, or no, it wasn't one Bitcoin, but gave out, you know, a fraction of a Bitcoin to every student that graduated.
I see. And
you know, there's support happening in different ways, but Bitcoin is an opportunity, right? In terms of, you know, how it's sure, not again big corporations, but it's helping the small people, right? It's helping people in foreign countries where, you know, their fiat currency isn't as strong as, you know, we're really blessed, right, to live in the United States where,
absolutely,
you know, $100 a couple of years from now still probably means $100. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a third world country, you know, that might not be the case. And same for, you know, if you have relatives in third world countries where you want to send them currency and you can't do it in local currency. You know, I was just in Zimbabwe about a month and a half ago, and you know, Zimbabwe is a country where, you know, there was hyperinflation. You know, they discontinued local currency there. You know, they're using a basket of different currencies like U.S. dollar and the South African rand. But even now, they've tried to reintroduce a new local fiat currency, and that's not really been successful because, you know, people, you know, if you ask local workers, like, oh, you know, we'd prefer to be paid in the U.S. dollar. Yeah. It holds more value and it has more value there. So, you know, that's a great example. And then, you know, I was lucky to be on the ground there to see that firsthand, because you hear about it and you hear people talk about it, but you don't understand it until you really see it firsthand.
What brought you there? Was you just wanted to go, or was there a business reason for you to go there, or?
No, I was actually, you know, just visiting Africa, you know, on holiday. So,
okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know, I've been doing a bit of that myself, trying to, you know, get out of the U.S. and figure out what's going on around the world, because it helps you kind of think about the world more clearly, especially when the technologies are evolving. And you're right on; these things are moving much faster, or they're much more compelling, or they're embraced a little bit more readily in these other countries because of, you know, those issues where we don't see, it's not compelling for us right now for the moment because we're dealing with U.S. dollars all the time. But yeah, really interesting. Well, we got a few more minutes left here for the podcast before we get out of here. There's always a couple of questions I like to ask people, and one is when you're diving in and in the middle of all this technology, is there something about the technology or applications or the way it's spinning so quickly that is a real challenge for you or becomes overwhelming, or are you just really so open right now that you're just like, bring it on? How are you thinking about how all this is changing so quickly?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important to think at a high level, both I do this personally, I think others need to think about it, how technology is influencing and impacting society,
right?
And like one of the things I always read about is AI.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to even like interact with humans one day.
Right.
We'll be a bunch of robots running around, and we're in a basement somewhere controlling them, and they're living out our lives. The other joke is maybe we're going to be in our basement living in a virtual reality world, and I think technology is important, right? It's been a real help, and right, it saves lives. It makes us closer, it makes us connected.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's a lot of potential dangers there. So when I think about technology, I think first off about the government needs to create smart policy, like especially in the U.S., where we can create a culture that encourages innovation, but encourages smart innovation, where innovation can flourish. But innovation can flourish in the correct ways,
mm-hmm.
in terms of like stuff like topics like AI, and making sure
right.
that's not used for the wrong things.
Right.
And two, I think it's imperative of us, again in the U.S. and abroad, for us to to learn about these technologies, right? Because not just from a business competitive standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. Because from the business standpoint of if you don't learn about these technologies and you don't learn about how it's influencing your business or how it's influencing your job, right? You could be out of a job, your business could be gone.
Right.
And it happens. Like Western Union was one of the biggest companies and probably going to disappear in the next 10 to 20 years. And then on a personal level, right? I have a grandmother who I love, but technology is definitely difficult for her. So,
right.
I hope as people get older, right, they're open to continuing to learn about new technologies because it's something that helps, right?
Right.
It's sometimes it's good to be able to text someone instead of call someone,
Right. Well, that's what I see. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's part of the message of the podcast is, you might not be interested in technology, but everyone else that you're going to continue or want to relate to is maybe embracing it, or definitely the younger generations are into it, and they want to communicate that way. That's the way they feel comfortable. So it's sort of like, you might just be isolating yourself if you don't keep your mind open to the change and to embracing some of these things. And I guess really that's my next question for you is, how do you have any like kind of techniques out there, or I'm sure sometimes you feel overwhelmed, but how do you kind of keep your mind open to embracing another thing? Like one more social network you got to figure out, one more twist of the Bitcoin universe you got to figure out. When it's you've already had to figure out 20 and you're like beaten down.
Yeah, I just try to think about what provides value. So I just started using this tool called the X.AI, which is a assistant scheduling technology using.
Okay.
I think actually that's how we scheduled this meeting.
Yeah.
Her name's Amy, but she's not a real person.
Okay.
And I CC her
She's
in
a
my
bot.
emails, and she schedules meetings for me.
Right.
It's like saves me time during the day, and it provides value. So like
Right.
if it delivers value and it saves time, saves money, whatever, I'm using it. And that's really how I think about things. And yeah, I just go from there.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I want to let that sink in for a second. So yeah, you try to focus on what provides value. I think that's a good way to filter things. When there's so many things, you're probably thinking like, which one should I learn? Like there's a million things to learn, right? When you start kind of going online and Googling. But yeah, if you focus on, well, what's really going to provide me value that might help you kind of wrap your head around the direction for you to go in or what's next. So speaking about what's next a little bit, or maybe what you've learned along the way here, is there what I call it a reinvention revelation that you can share with people, that something that you've learned about yourself or learned about business or these technologies that just looking back a few years ago you had no idea that you'd kind of be in this place or have any idea what was coming? What can you share with people about your recent experience?
Yeah, so I think it's it's important to be open-minded, and as I said before, being able to look at new technologies and what's going to be impactful. For me, I didn't think that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin would play such an important role in my life. I remember starting with it, whatever, it's been 7-8 years ago. Mm-hmm. People ask you, well, are you buying drugs?
Right.
They would ask questions like, this is made up money. Are they mining like gold? Is there digging Bitcoin somewhere? Is Bitcoin real?
Right.
And now I'm here, and I think especially with the Facebook introduction of Libra, it's really become mainstream.
Right.
So it's become a mainstream.
Yeah,
tool.
quite a journey, Yeah, I mean that's really a message right there too. Again, where it's you're 10, 12 years old. You have no idea what you're going to be when you're growing up. You have some like general ideas in your mind, and then something just comes along out of left field, and it's like bam, bam, that's your career, or that's really how you kind of enter the world in a way. Cool. Well, I got one last question for you, which it's the first time I'm asking actually someone that's on the podcast, but I feel like it's just the right question these days, and it is, what are you feeling urgent about right now? These things are moving so fast, and there's a lot of opportunity and things to watch out for, but what's on your mind right now? Like, man, I really need to do this. I need to do it soon, or I need to get this done, this quarter. Not necessarily a business goal, but something that's out there. Like, what do you need to understand, or what do you need to learn?
So I'm actually thinking the opposite. I think one of the most important things we can do as individuals is every day take a second and stop.
Okay.
And appreciate the people that are around us. Appreciate the things we have, and appreciate the things we'll have going forward. I think we live in such a hectic world where there's so much going on. We don't take a minute to go, I'm lucky that I'm here. I'm lucky that I've had the success I've had. I know the people I know. I have the friends I have. I have the family I have. Mm-hmm. So I actually encourage everyone listening and encourage everyone out there to instead of be urgent and think about I have to do this today. Take a moment and just appreciate being alive and being here.
Right. Okay. I love it. So be urgent about chilling out, man. Being grateful. And realizing, especially if you're here in the U.S. or listening to the podcast here, you're a select group in the world already, and just, appreciate what you have. Very cool. Well, Ari, it's been great having you on the show. If people are interested in finding out more about your innovation consulting or what's coming with Grasshopper Capital or what you're up to these days, where should they go? How would they get in touch with you if you're interested?
Yeah, so they can find me on Twitter. My handle is amlewis4. Our website for Greenblock Group is greenblockgroup.com, and our website for Grasshopper Capital is grasshopper.capital.
Okay.
So you guys, follow me on Twitter and visit us on our site.
Very cool. Okay, I'll have all that information in the show notes, so be able to make sure you check the show notes, and you can always go to JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com to find all the episodes. So, Ari, thanks a lot. Cool.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man.
How did that go?
Oh, it's good stuff. Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at JimJimsReinventionRevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it, and will help others find the same value that you found.